I'm not a huge royal watcher, but I really do like these two a lot. I think they're so empathetic, and it's been tough for them. And I think my heart breaks. I think about Meghan and what she has to think about, that she could be sold out by her own family, that her father or her sister would sell a letter or tape a conversation or whatever they do and sell her out. Like, that has got to be so, so heavy that my heart breaks. And they're not easy on Meghan. They haven't been easy on Meghan at all.
At all.
They're extra.
They're extra. They're extra.
I think that's what it is. I think that it's fair for the British tabloids. And to be clear, the British tabloids in this case are not the supermarket rags that we have here. Over there, it's the newspapers. Like they're on the paper that makes your fingers dirty, and they come out every day. They're talking about those kinds of papers. So it's not actually these magazines that we're used to over here in North America. People take the news that's in these tabloids, these newspapers, very seriously in the UK. So it drives public opinion, and that's why it can be so damaging. And for every 25 shouty opinion pieces attacking Meghan and Harry, there was not one opinion piece in the Daily Mail by someone, say, Piers Morgan, who is constantly blowing his top off about Meghan, about another royal.
I wish people would just stop reading Piers Morgan. He is out there to troll everybody. He does it so intentionally. And then in that article that he writes about, he's really mad about is not only the hypocrisy, what he sees as the hypocrisy of these two in particular, that they're going around on flights, they're hanging around with celebrities. He was very upset about Harry's response. And he feels like it was over the top as a royal to be so emphatically crushed by the fact that there's a public interest in these letters, that if this correspondence, in the drama that is going on between Meghan and her father. And I mean, I just think that is so, why wouldn't he, to your point, why wouldn't he be interested in defending his wife? I mean, and I'm the person who is the least royalist on here, but I feel like, you know what, all things being fair, Piers needs to just shut up.
Phew, thank you, the social CTV Canada. Hello, family. Let's talk. Because what you just watched was not a Sussex fan edit, not a Twitter thread, not a YouTube commentary channel like mine. That was mainstream Canadian television. Calm voices, daytime lighting, no pitchforks, no agenda. And yet, the truth still walked right onto the panel, sat down, crossed its legs, and said, so anyway, Meghan Sussex was treated horribly. And that right there is why this clip matters. Because for years, we've been told that defending Meghan is biased, that pointing out the cruelty is stanning, that acknowledging racism, misogyny, and tabloid abuse is somehow exaggeration. And yet here we are, people who openly admit they are not royal watchers, not royalists, not emotionally invested, and they still land on the same conclusion. This treatment was excessive, invasive, and deeply unfair. And the reason this moment hits differently is because they didn't focus on gowns or podcasts or Netflix deals. They talked about something far more uncomfortable, something the British media works overtime to minimize: family betrayal. Let's sit with that for a second, because when people talk about Meghan Sussex, they love to frame everything as fame, money, or ambition. What they rarely want to acknowledge is the psychological weight of knowing that members of your own family are willing to sell you out. Not metaphorically, literally. Letters, conversations, private moments, monetized. That's not celebrity drama, that's trauma. Imagine marrying into one of the most scrutinized institutions on Earth, moving across an ocean, learning a new culture, navigating racist dog whistles and headlines, and then realizing that the people who were supposed to protect you, who knew you before the cameras, are now feeding those same cameras. And the press doesn't say, wow, that's heartbreaking. Instead, they ask, why is she upset? This is where the cruelty really shows, because the expectation was never that Meghan Sussex wouldn't feel pain. The expectation was that she would endure it quietly, smile politely, absorb it gracefully. And when she didn't, when she reacted like a human being, that reaction became the crime. And the panel clocked that, gently but firmly. They acknowledged how heavy that reality must be, how destabilizing it is to live with the constant fear that private moments could become tomorrow's headlines. And what struck me most is how rarely that empathy is shown in UK commentary. Over there, the focus is always on optics, protocol, and performance, never on the emotional cost. Now let's talk about the tabloids, because this is where people outside the UK often misunderstand the scale of the problem. British tabloids are not harmless gossip magazines you flip through at the grocery store. They are daily newspapers. They influence public opinion. They shape narratives that bleed into politics, television, and institutional decision-making. When they decide someone is a target, it's not casual, it's coordinated. And for Meghan Sussex, it was relentless. Story after story, headline after headline, tone dripping with suspicion, hostility, and coded language. And what the panel highlighted, without even needing to shout, is the imbalance, the sheer volume of negative coverage aimed at Meghan and Harry versus the silence or protection extended to others. That imbalance matters. Because when one person is constantly positioned as the villain, the public stops questioning it. It becomes background noise. It becomes just how things are. And that's how character assassination works, not through one explosive article, but through repetition. And then enters the usual suspect, Piers Morgan. Now, I actually appreciated how the panel handled him because they didn't treat him as some misunderstood truth-teller. They called him what he is, a provocateur, a professional outrage machine, someone who thrives on attention, thrives on conflict, and thrives on targeting the same woman over and over again because it keeps his name circulating. What's fascinating is how openly they acknowledge that his behavior is intentional, not accidental, not emotional, intentional. That matters because it reframes his commentary not as concern, but as performance. And let's address the argument he and others love to push, that Harry and Meghan should somehow be above reacting, that Harry, as a royal, should not have been so emphatic in his defense of his wife, that there was public interest in private family correspondence. Public interest is not the same as public curiosity, and this is where the hypocrisy collapses completely. Because when William defends Catherine, he's praised as protective. When Charles defends Camilla, it's framed as loyalty. But when Harry defends Meghan Sussex, suddenly it's emotional, excessive, or inappropriate. Why? Because Meghan was never meant to be defended. She was meant to be absorbed, sacrificed to keep the machine running smoothly. And Harry refusing to play that role is what truly broke the system. The panel touched on something so basic, yet so radical in royal commentary, the idea that defending your spouse is normal, expected, human. And the fact that this even needs to be said out loud tells you how distorted the narrative has become. Harry didn't overreact. He reacted, and the outrage over that reaction says everything we need to know about the environment than that about him. What also stood out to me is how the panel differentiated criticism from cruelty. They weren't saying Harry and Meghan should never be criticized. They were saying the scale, tone, and fixation crossed a line. And that's an important distinction because critics love to hide behind free speech while ignoring power dynamics. When every mistake is magnified, when intentions are constantly questioned, when empathy is selectively applied, that's not balanced discourse, that's targeting. And Meghan Sussex has been targeted in a way that few public figures ever experience, let alone justify. The irony is that moments like this panel discussion don't come from Sussex-controlled media. They come from outsiders, people far enough removed to see the situation clearly. And when even they are saying this went too far, it should give everyone pause. But instead of reflecting, the same voices double down. More outrage, more mockery, more dehumanization. Because acknowledging Meghan's humanity would require acknowledging wrongdoing. And that's the one thing the British tabloid system is allergic to. So when people ask why Meghan and Harry left, why they set boundaries, why they spoke out, this clip answers that without ever needing to shout. It shows how normalized the cruelty became, how defending yourself was reframed as arrogance, how silence was demanded but never rewarded. And here's the truth that keeps slipping through the cracks. Meghan Sussex did not fail the royal family. The royal media ecosystem failed her. It failed her to protect her, failed her to treat her fairly, failed to apply the same standards it applies to others. And when she stopped accepting that treatment, she became the problem. That's not scandal, that's exposure. And every time a mainstream panel like this one speaks plainly about it, the old narratives crack just a little more. Because you can dismiss fans, you can dismiss commentators like me, but you can't easily dismiss people who openly say they don't care about the monarchy, yet still recognize injustice when they see it. That's why this clip matters. Not because it's loud, but because it's calm. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's reasonable. Not because it's radical, but because it's human. And the more these conversations happen outside the UK echo chamber, the harder it becomes to pretend this was all imagined. It wasn't. Meghan Sussex endured something extraordinary. Harry stood beside her, and the backlash to that says everything we need to know about the system they left behind. And honestly, good for them. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you in the next video, and happy Sunday, family.